Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us on Save News TV. I am your host, A Z Hubbard, and we have a very special guest here tonight with a very dynamic topic, and that is Mr. Timothy Richardson. Now, would you like me to read all of your accolades, Timothy, or would you like to give us a synopsis of who you are?
Oh, you can just briefly cover it. You don't have to cover everything. Just the
Oh,
genealogy.
yes, I'll give you all a brief synopsis. This gentleman is Mr. Richardson is very accomplished in his field, and we should be very proud to have him here. He has over 13 years of experience in the U.S. Department of Treasury and Service. He joined the IRS in July 2010 as part of a student temporary experience program, which is called STEP, that ultimately became Pathways. His experience has not been limited to audits, internal management documents, internal revenue manuals, learning and development systems, and program management. In 2015, he was commended by the WI Division Commissioner's Award for Transition Closeout of the Health Coverage Tax Credit as National Vice President for the IRS Employee Resources Group. Timothy inaugurated a career development campaign of 400 plus memberships. He's led ERG formulation of virtual alumni recruitment ambassadors to make federal careers attractive to historically Black college and university campuses. Timothy delivered Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People to 30 plus audiences. He obtained a Master's of Science in Management in 2016 from Strayer University. He's earned a BS in Healthcare Management from Winston-Salem State University in May of 2012. And mind you, it is with honors, everybody, with honors. And he was honored as the 2021 WSSU 40 Under 40 Awards recipient to fundraise scholarships for students. Also, in addition, he is in April of 2020, Timothy established Richardson Genealogy Service as a strategy to preserve, research, publish, and train various aspects of Eastern North Carolina African American history. Timothy is regarded as an expert family organizer and historian by his family, local community, and network. Since 2016, Timothy worked to collect and document both maternal and paternal histories from 1660 to present in 5 publications. He has also studied neighborhood communities and school systems of Goldsboro, such as Carver Heights, Little Washington, and Dillard-Goldsboro Alumni and Friends. Timothy's genealogy experience was shaped by biblical principles, extended relatives and communities, ancestry records, key family events, and project management tools. His forthcoming book, The ABCs of Black Family Genealogy, offers 26 steps to collect, document, and publish your family history. Timothy's tips have reached many audiences, from the Internal Revenue Service to Dillard-Goldsboro Alumni and Friends Incorporated. So, once again, thank you so much, Timothy. I've thoroughly introduced you to the audience.
Thank you so much, Miss Hubbard, and it's a pleasure to be with you this evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Just call me AZ. Um,
Oh, okay.
so, the topic at hand, and, why is America and certain key different states trying to erase African American Black history? We started noticing that from Texas to Florida to Arkansas. What is your synopsis of this?
Now, that's a big question. That's a big one because it reminds me of the past and how that nothing is truly new under the sun with our present here. So I'll start off with a couple of quotes here. Frederick Douglass, the great Frederick Douglass, said that knowledge makes a man unfit to be a slave. So having knowledge of our history is liberating. So that's number one. Marcus Garvey said that history is who and what we are. People who deny their past does not have a future. Most importantly, biblically speaking, Ezekiel around chapter 3 says, when a flimsy wall is built, they cover it with whitewash. Therefore, tell those who cover it with whitewash that it is going to fall. So that was, in understanding the time period, that was when the Israelites were in exile in Babylon from their homeland, being in Israel. So a lot was taking place at the time, and I think that specific book just shows a lot of parallels to understand and begin understanding what's happening now. But to dive deeper into the point, whitewashing history. This is a mere case of whitewashing history. Again, it's nothing new. It's always been around to erase certain traces of Black significance, not just with the slavery and things of that sort, but anything that was achievable, from Blacks, beginning, with Tulsa, Oklahoma, the Greenwood District in 1921, all those thriving Black communities, Seneca Village in what's now Central Park in New York City. That was a former Black community and dwelling. Now it's a park. And also Georgetown, which is an affluent community in Washington, D.C., that was a former Black community. So anything of Black significance, or really anything Black, it's always been a quest to undermine or just simply erase. So I'll stop there and see if you have anything to chime in on there.
Right. And that is so true because, many neighborhoods, as we know, was, annihilated within the Black community because the Black community was thriving. But, now when you read the quote about history repeating itself, but if children do not know their history, of course it's going to repeat themselves. And that's why it's critical for the school systems to teach Black history.
Absolutely, and getting that knowledge, because that's the beginning to liberation. As Frederick Douglass said, knowledge makes man unfit to be a slave, and we'll dive a little bit deeper into that. But more presently, the present quest to whitewash history, as you mentioned, Arkansas and a couple of other states being 44 total states, and we're only 50, so that's more than half of the whole country that's on this ride.
Exactly.
Yeah. And Florida has made the most thunder or waves with their governor, who's also a presidential candidate, who wants to take down, the school curriculum and also the curriculum in the workplace as well, on topics such as Black history, critical race theory, particularly slavery, and sexuality as well. So it's a lot of all of those things that really need to be understood at a foundational level that is being attempted to be snatched away. And in terms of whitewashing history, it's really out of pure ignorance, because I think I heard our former president over the weekend, or maybe a week before, he made a comment on slavery and saying at the end of the war, or Lincoln's dealings with the war, that basically slavery could have been negotiated. And I don't know what aspect particularly he was talking about, but I can't think of anything. It's either you're going to have it or you ain't. Who wants to be in bondage? So you're going to negotiate my bondage. But again, I think that was all ignorant. And, going back to Florida, Vice President Harris condemned DeSantis and his efforts to suppress history in the Florida schools and workplaces. So these are some key things that have been shaping where we are today to whitewash, our history. And again, The Bible clearly says when a flimsy wall is built, they cover it with whitewash. So tell them it's going to fall. So, these authorities have to come to an understanding and coming to value our history to not only do justice for us as a people, but to save this country as a whole. It's very clear. When you overlook God's people, this is what happens. It's going to fall. So, but going further, I find it very disturbing that they began to remove some of the books from the shelves in the schools, particularly Toni Morrison, and she's a great author. Also, the Project 1619 book, I'm sure you're familiar with that. And I can't think of
Yes.
the author, but I know she was from UNC Chapel Hill. But banning that as well, all those foundational books to help us understand the journey, and not in a snippet or glimpse, because that's what they've given us. I was thinking back earlier, I can't even really remember, in school learning about slavery or anything. And if we did, it was all those, in terms of Black history, it was always those stories like Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, and things like that. Nothing really in your background or your, personal life, pretty much as it relates to, your Black history, which I'll also touch on. So I'll stop there before I
Oh,
continue and see if you think.
right. We might have gotten a week of Black history or a day or whatever, as I recall. But had plenty of time for Western civilization, different other histories. But going back to your point, according to Future Ed, they have identified 47 bills introduced this year in 23 state legislations that would limit the topic of Black American history, which includes Alabama, Arizona, Idaho, Iowa, New Hampshire, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Texas, and Utah have enacted 11 of these bills. And of course, Alabama, which I think I did mention. And there is a whole list of the bills that I was able to pull up, and I'm not going to go through each one of them, but it seems like it's been a recent effort to really push forward the erasure of Black American history.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And, in those states, I don't think I saw North Carolina, really being one that proposed legislation. And I may be wrong, but I do know they have the North Carolina African American Heritage Commission, that they're spearheading the map marker program, going through the state, the 100 counties, identifying what is the important Black places of significance, basically. So, I know they would have some competitive forces, is what I'm saying, if they did have legislation there, because Black history is growing in North Carolina. But back to the point, it was explained that, researching the topic more in depth, that white America is maybe mostly afraid of confrontation, or not so much afraid, they don't want confrontation. So that's the reason primarily is for guilt. I heard that, a lot of people don't want their children in elementary coming home on the school buses saying that, oh, people, we're devils, basically. They don't want that belief or anything. And or that we're racist, or that our race was earlier on at a period in time. But so there's a quest there to suppress it for that particular reason, to protect the current generation. They don't feel, which is fair, that they should have to pay for the sins of their fathers. But the Bible says that the sins of the fathers will visit each generation. So
Mm-hmm.
so it will be a reckoning, but that's one reason there. But the irony is that there's a quest to protect those that are innocent to slavery, that generations later. But what about the ramifications and impact that has impacted us after slavery, and it goes back to us just not mattering at all. We'll never have a place, and I don't know if it's a cultural shift as well. I was going to mention that as well. Now, we never truly mattered in this country, and
Or yeah.
and as we go forth in the future, we're going to have a less chance of mattering as well, because back in the 1800s, it was really just black and white and Europeans, immigrants. But now it's more diverse, and the black population is shrinking and shrinking and shrinking within the whole melting pot. I believe by 2050, Hispanics are going to be the leading population here. So a lot of these things is the last final call to preserve colonial America, if you will. And so that's what this all of these actions are really, in light of. But another point to confrontation is that since the media really has began calling out all of these evils that the forefathers have done, down came statues and things like that. They changed Jefferson Davis Highway in Alexandria, Virginia, that goes down to Richmond, Virginia. A lot of people don't want that, erasing the Civil War era and anything that really acknowledges that it happened. I learned that, I believe, the LSAT exam, the law school exam, up until recently, when they go over employment law, they list Negro, so that was stripped from the test, but it had always been there. But until a student complained about it and raised concern about it, they removed, the term Negro. And it's like, why do you have to have that there? But again, it's a cultural shift, and with cultural shift, things are changing in this country, as I mentioned, and we're shrinking. And you have to think back to the Bible. Again, another parallel. In Moses' time, which was 400 years after Joseph, the Israelites got into Egypt through Joseph 400 years before Moses came. And 400 years later, by the time Moses rose to power, people of his generation, and even Egyptians, did not know or care anything about Joseph, the importance he had on them, or anything like that. And crown is not secure for all generations, but so it's a case of that as well. With the growing population of this country, a lot of people are going to be less understanding of the things we went through, and we're probably going to have a less position and place in this country at some point. And to give you an example, the Freedmen's Bureau was established right after the Civil War by President Lincoln. It was only existent for maybe about 10 years before Andrew Johnson from North Carolina disbanded it. They gave out a payout or set aside funds, but I don't think the majority of them were ever distributed to maybe a number of Black people, recently freed. And that money was never distributed in some cases. They started a bank, a Freedmen's Bank, Savings Bank, and Loans Bank to help, teach financial literacy to the former slaves. And, they shut that down. A lot of people lost their money. And recently, about 3 years ago, the Treasury Department started kind of resurrected that an element of the agency that formerly existed through a conference. But now the conference is for brown people or Black people. It's to accommodate not only African Americans, but Latino Americans. And it's like, okay, now, what's their connection to, the slavery, and the original, kind of sort of. And that's just being, honest, because we trace our stories back to bondage, so, but yeah, I'll stop there.
Okay. Well, one thing, is that we have to be able to trace our lineage. And with technology today, that is possible for us to trace our lineage. I know some people, like with me, I am really a rarity. And I think, we were having this conversation that my family can actually trace ourselves back to the Igbo tribe. We are Israelites as far as our DNA. We have had that done. We went, first it was slave records that traced us back, our father from the east coast of New Bern area, the slave masters, the slave ships. We have the cemetery with all the people. And many years later, as DNA began to surface, then the male cousin in our family took the DNA test, and there's a certain code of DNA that traces per region. And so we have that code. So we are from the, tribe of Judah. We can, my family. And so we can actually trace it. It's some people it might be more difficult because they haven't used that thing, but it took our family many, many years, and many families don't even have, like I said, we had a family cemetery from my grandfather, great grandfather, down in the New Bern Cove City area, that we were able to glean a lot of information. And so history is critical because some family member might recognize a name as far as some accomplishment that they might have made, some discovery that a African American or Black person made, that they can pull and get a pinpoint where their family can start to research. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. You made a very great point. From DNA to technology and even to the family cemetery, those are all places where you can grasp information. And even now, as we're mentioning, with the quest to censor all of our Black history, there is a commission that entertains the idea of redistributing that original fund from the Freedmen's Bureau that was allotted for African Americans. So, in thinking about the payout history for reparations, it might seem like something that's far from us in terms of a reality, but payouts have occurred in our history for the Indians, for the Chinese, and even in recent terms. A lot of people are starting to get on board with the idea. California, the state, I know they gave entitlements out to some folks. I know Princeton University School of Divinity, if you are a descendant of a slave or African American that was enslaved, you can go to their divinity school for free, basically. So it's different types of reparations, free education, money. My pastor, Bishop Glenn A. Stables of the Temple of Praise of Washington, of the Temple of Praise in Washington, D.C., mentioned that he mentioned this in January 2020 that for the 39 million African Americans presently here at Continental, that the U.S. government had enough money to pay out at least a single $1 million to each person, 39 million. And then I read some other place that the Robert Johnson plan, where he, as a business executive and corporate America, he said that based on his calculations and his research, everyone would be entitled to about a one-time payment of about $330,000. So
It should be
considering,
more than that.
yeah, I'd say so as well. 400 years of free work. So yeah, and that's more than one person. Yeah, if you consider, their work life, and then after the time they couldn't work, they weren't living for free. So you got to consider all of that. But then you have to think like, okay, our position in America, we're constantly reminded that, we are truly what the Bible says. And the Bible says in Lamentations, she who was queen among the provinces has now become a slave in Lamentations 1. Lamentations 4, how the gold has lost its luster, the fine gold has become dull. That's us. Gold is in Africa. We are golden people. And, we've always shined, and there's a quest to always just now make our presence and just their existence as dull as possible. And like it's saying here in Lamentations in verse 5, those who were brought up in royal purple is a royal color, now lie on ash heaps. And my point is, granted, all of these estimates or quotes for reparations are we seriously going to come or move closer to it? Because last year, $585 million or billion was given to Ukraine, and right after that, monies were given, in emergency. It's always an emergency that these high dollar amounts are given out to people, and it's like, okay, so are they? What are they really waiting for? In terms of acknowledging us. So it leads us to the point that, like you were saying, we have to begin to take matters into our own hands, through our family
Exactly.
history, because with all the efforts that we've just discussed, is if we leave it up to other people, number one, it may not get told, and number two, it's going to be told to glorify, kind of sort of when it shouldn't be glorifying certain people. It's always going to be that some people are the hero, and maybe we're the victim, kind of sort of, and that we have to demystify, these false narratives. So I personally recommend family genealogy because, through learning family genealogy, a professor at Duke University, I heard on a YouTube video, he mentioned that if, we should get to the point that we, get reparations, you have to be able to prove and document your family legacy, at least 3 generations. So when I discovered that, I thought that was great. I thought I was already on the right path. So I wanted others to understand how to document their legacies. And even if there's no payout, it's joy and just healing and knowing your identity, understanding your family story, breaking generational curses. It gives you reassurance that I'm going to make it, because you see how God worked in the lives of those ancestors over a period of time you're studying. It's like, wow, the same God that had them, he has me, so we went through certain, mountains and valleys, and they came out, they survived, through death,
Yeah.
all kinds of things, wars, everything. But yeah.
Exactly. And one thing about knowing your history, it takes you out of the position of victimhood. Um, African Americans in America, um, they always want to try to portray us in a victimhood position, as far as something as simple as you can't get a ID to go vote. I mean, come on now. Come on.
Mm-hmm.
Are we that inept that we can't go get an ID to vote? Okay. So, it's those types
Mm-hmm.
of things. Also, reparations, we'll go back, jump into that a little bit, not going too deep. But, even the slave owners was given reparations for
Oh
the
yeah.
slaves.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
They had to give up their
After the
free
war.
labor, and they were given reparations. And it's very simple, really, to go back 3 generations, and also throwing in the mix of something that you touched on, was the fact that the new population that's entering into the United States. And it's amazing to me, and this was an eye-opener for me, during COVID. I hadn't worked for nobody in years, but I did do some for the census. And everyone, I don't care what race you are, even you can be, Hispanics. Let me use that word. I'm sorry, brother Car, whether you watch, you don't know who I'm Latinos, Native Americans, whatever, they have to check that box as white. So there are even some nations that are of African descent, Indians, Pakistan, different nations, that when they come into this country and they fill out that census, and this was just like an eye opener for me.
Mm-hmm.
They have to be classified as white, irrespective of them not being. You know what I'm saying? So,
Mm-hmm.
um, also there's been an influx, even though there's an influx from different. It will use African nations to Ghanaians, Jamaicans, or whatever that's coming into, even though they are us as far as native
Mm-hmm.
roots. They don't, like you stated, they don't have the experience of a black person that whose lineage their forefathers was from slavery. So they have a different experience of America.
Mm-hmm.
Is that?
Yes, yes,
So
that's
I said a whole
absolutely.
lot of stuff to jump off of what you said.
Yeah, you did, and it's all spot on. Like back to the example about Joseph. When times are changing, and we haven't always had a seat of relevance, in history. When we finally do begin one, it's going to shrink. It's going to continue to shrink. But you're absolutely right about how the enslavers got paid after the Civil War, and that was news to me just maybe about 2 years back. And there's some life insurance companies still around today that made the payouts back then at that time. I know Aetna is one, New York Life Insurance Company as well. And it just to share numbers, I traced my mother's father's family, my grandpa Earl. I traced back to his third great grandmother, a 9-year-old girl named Adeline McCorkle, who was sold in April of 1833 to an enslaver in Iredell County, North Carolina. I think she was valued at $200 at 9 years old. And her enslaver at the time had about a personal value and wealth of 9,000, I want to say. And when I did the currency calculator to today's time, that's equivalent to today to about $330,000. So they already had that much. And when they after the war, when everybody got freed, just imagine that probably doubled to like $500,000, and with our value today. So that's a point worth mentioning. But in retelling our own story, I know I'm going to say that we've always prevailed. When you think about it, we've always prevailed because church, for instance, the Presbyterians or the Methodist Church that was first here. I believe Morris Brown was the one to start the AME Church, African Methodist or Episcopalian Church, AME Church, and obviously there was some sort of split in the 1800s that led them to create that base church to probably have more control and leeway over the things that they wanted to do. And so not just the church, after the war, we always knew we had to take it into our own hands. Started Lincoln University, Howard University, Hampton University, our own, for us. Hospitals, Black hospitals as well, and businesses that grew, to be great districts like Tulsa, as we already mentioned. But again, we've always prevailed. Again, like I said at the beginning, this has always been, under the sun, because there was a time when they banned reading. Slaves, it was illegal for a slave to know how to read. And back to what Frederick Douglass said, knowledge makes a man unfit to be a slave. So banning the ability to read, because there's liberation, but it's deep, it's spiritual when you begin to ban things like that. Because if you think about even back to the 1500s or 1400s, when the Holy Bible was first printed and translated from Latin to English, I can't think of the guy's name, but I know he went on the run for 20 years in a documentary, the guy that translated it over. And a lot of people lost their lives for, the Bible and things of that time. So it just tells you the magnitude of having information documented, how liberating it can be, and how penetrating to the soul, where people can form their own, conclusions about what they are able to read, if they can read. So we covered the cultural shift and the bans. So next I want to say, as I already mentioned, we've always kind of sort of glorified. Now, this is kind of, I'll say, good and bad, because while they are shutting the door to our history in some aspects, it's really forcing us to kind of grab the torch, like I've already said, with the churches and colleges and hospitals and businesses, because again, if we don't tell our own story, it will not get told. So,
if it got told incorrectly. And that was one of the things that I was going to ask you next, and you just segued it right into it. As families, how can families begin to take control and begin to teach their children, because many years, centuries ago, years ago, we did teach our own. And even though they go to a public school, it's still important to make sure that your children know. So what are some of the strategies for parents, or for grandparents, for nieces and nephews, and even those in entertainment field? If you're a rapper or you're a singer, sing our history, rap our history. You're a writer, write the history. I mean, we are a very ingenious people. Get our history out there. Go ahead. I
Yeah,
didn't mean to cut you off, but go ahead.
oh no, you're fine. I'm sorry. Oh yeah, I'm just in agreement. Absolutely. Definitely, there are strategies out there to take. Let's focus on. It's Martin Luther King Day, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and how I like to think of it is the dream to have is to know your family history. That is a great dream to have, but in taking our eyes off of the Phyllis Whitleys, Ida B. Wells, Harriet Tubmans, we have to look in our own backyards for those stories of strength and success stories, because we can stand on Harriet's, stories, but we don't come from her. This is spiritual, and it's genetic and generational. That the Bible is a whole story of a family, one family, and all those stories tell how God worked in their individual lives. And that's why people that read the Bible get strength from those stories. And, we were brought into the larger family through the Gentiles, but there are a lot of things you can do. And I'll touch on two quickly, but the first thing that you can do, which is what I realized in retrospect, I realized that my dad's mom, my grandma Dot, her family, they had a family reunion ever since I can remember, the McIntyre family reunion. And last year marked 60 years, started in 1963, really December 1962. And what that was, Grandma Dot had 10 siblings, and her dad was the first of 15. So all of those 15 children would come together through my grandmother and her siblings. They would bring them all together throughout the years. And it would be as many as 300 people in the room at one time. She had 37 first cousins. And when you come from a family that large and complex, it's kind of hard to know each other. But it's interesting because even today, the size still have communication and awareness of one another. And it's like, again, how can we be this large and everybody, not know each other personally, but some of the people from the other sides or tribes, what I call them. And but I would definitely recommend a family reunion is a great communication tool, because for my family it was obviously once a year, but I knew that one time a year we were all going to see each other, me and some of my first cousins. So we might not have saw each other Christmas or like that, but I always knew, come Labor Day weekend, when typically their reunions, we were going to see each other that one time a year. And then, during that one time a year, you got to know what was going on with the different sides, who was in your area. People brought pictures, and that one time a year, you got to see some other pictures as well. Got to get contacts. If you plan to do your family history, that is the opportune time to get contacts and, put an outline together. But I would say, again, a family reunion is a great way to keep the history alive, because as much as you come together, you're representing those former lineages. And I read an article that said it's even more important today, because most people today cannot name all four grandparents. And I kind of find it hard to believe,
Right.
coming from the kind of families I come from. It's like, wow. But that can be true too for different reasons too as well. But another thing I would say is to definitely, and the elders, they make the whole genealogy journey well worth it. All the searches, the endless nights finding stuff, because the things they tell you, elders, spend as much time with them as you can. Listen to any and everything that
And
they have to say.
document. Film.
And
They can
document,
film
record it.
everything else.
Yeah.
They can record everything else. Record and document the elders as they speak. Go ahead.
Yes, but my grandmother, my grandma died. by the time I began to document our family history, she had one of 10 siblings left alive, and we all went down to Atlanta for one of my dad's first cousin's funeral at the time in 2009. And her sister was esteemed, highly esteemed. Her name was Aunt Alma, and actually she'll be 100 years old this year if she was still alive. But she was the first person in my family to go to college. She was the director of financial aid at Elizabeth City State University. She started the Alpha Kappa Alpha chapter at Elizabeth City State, and I know this is their day. But my point is, at about age 85 years old, in a hospital bed when we all went to go visit her, of that age, you can sometimes think people are kind of talking out of their mind and things, but she said something when a commercial went by. It was a white lady on TV. She said, that lady looks like Grandma Julia. And everybody was around the room like, and then her daughter, Allison, said, yeah, Grandma Julia was a biracial great grandmother that spanked her as a child. And she remembered that, like back from the 1920s or 1930s. And long story short, I researched that Grandma Julia. I was able to piece together her family tree. She had 13 kids born between 1869 and 1884. And one of her kids was my grandma Dot's grandmother, who is known as Mama Ann. But I think about how that visit to Atlanta with Aunt Alma and just two single words, Grandma Julia, really started the journey. So years later, maybe about 6, 7 years later, I started doing research, and that name came back up again. And a lot of people, my grandma's first cousins, all of her siblings were dead by the time I started it. So her first cousins are still among us, and they had photos, they had stories, like very deep stories about these people. And it's like, if I had just stopped with my grandmother's siblings, the 10 that are all dead, I wouldn't have gotten as far as I did. So when you do your journey, there are certain things you have to know. There are certain roadblocks you're going to face. So that's why I'd love to, go more in depth on this book, because as much as as much as it's a great idea to document the history, there's going to be some resistance for sure.
Oh, of
It just
course,
is.
of course.
Black people are special people. I love my people, but it's not a walk in the park, is what I'm saying, if you're just going to put your history together. So there's certain things I like to share with you and caution you on, and but definitely take advantage of your elders, because like I said, my grandmother's first cousins who are still alive today, they gave me so many stories. Like my grandmother's first cousin Margaret, she told me about their grandmother, Mama Ann, that was born 1879. She told me, because she lived in the house with them, said that she used to go around. She was a spiritual lady. My family, I come from a spiritual foundation. My family, my grandmother's brothers and her dad built a church, the New Stony Hill Holy Church in Goldsboro, North Carolina. They built it between
Oh,
61 and 62. And my Mama Ann, my grandma's grandmother, she was a part of the group that started the church in 1903 when they were meeting around in a bush shelter. But my point is, I come from spiritual roots. Margaret said that she used to go around the house speaking in tongues and just really waging spiritual warfare. And, I realized why my family was a spiritual, how it became to be like many decades later. And I was able to trace it back to Mama Ann and say, here she was, a child of, both her parents were slaves. She saw how God got them through Jim Crow, the Reconstruction, everything. And she knew, in speaking over her family and children, that the same God that got them through that will get her people. She may not have ever saw them. So it's just really great to, go back and trace those strengths, like why we are where we are today, in terms of, because our family reunion, our family song is "We've come this far by faith." So, it really just makes sense. It just came full circle doing the history.
Mm. And one thing I would like to say, and this came up with conversation with one of my cousins that I was talking to the other day, is don't discredit some superstitions that we think that are superstitions from the elders, because that can lead back to certain things. You
Mm-hmm.
know, and amazingly, certain it leads back to certain traditions from the forefathers, and what we might consider as superstitions today really isn't a superstition. It had to do with when they were, their fathers and their grandfathers and great grandfathers, parents were in Africa, and other, that these are the things that and I'll use a perfect example is the calendar. You
Mm-hmm.
know, sometimes we think of certain things. There were certain things that, you know, like my mother, you know, she would not eat pork. My father, he would. My mother would not. There were certain things and there were certain reasons why. But I think
Mm-hmm.
because the conditioning behind slavery, they were not allowed to say certain things openly, and certain things didn't get shared. But there was a reason
Mm-hmm.
why my mother didn't, and there was a reason why you know, different things, even down
Mm-hmm.
to, like I said, like the calendar, you know, certain times, or the moon, and like when you plant things, why, you know, you know, we thinking technology, 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 and we're saying, oh, that's superstitious. No, there's a certain time for the growing of the moons, and those things that we consider superstitions are not necessarily superstitions. And we really
Mm-hmm.
need to probably take a step back, write it down, do some research, and see exactly what its origins are. And that also
Mm-hmm.
can lead you back to certain things in your family. But you know, as far as we as a people, we have never really gave over our identity to man to tell us, you know, to teach us. So like you stated, we as a people need to take that power back. We see the school
Mm-hmm.
systems are trying to discredit, or you know, totally wash out teaching Black history, whether it's your families or the history as a whole. So we need to begin to have those conversations within our own group, whether it's, you know, our nieces, our nephews, our cousins, you know, children, grandchildren. We need to have regular conversations. And you know,
Mm-hmm.
even back in biblical, you know, we spoke of the Bible. They would share, you know, how from generation to generation they would tell the stories of the previous generations, and we sort of got out of
Exactly.
that.
But you know, that's a part of us as well, because in Africa, depending on what part you go to, they have the griot, the person that learns all the history and, you know, really goes into in-depth training to, you know, memory through memory, you know, training to remember the tribal histories. That's what I learned. One of my Lyft drivers told me that from Africa. But you made a
Mm.
lot of great points, and some of those belief systems as well go back to Africa, you know, as well. You know, one of the things I talk about in my book as well, about what are some of the belief systems that have shaped the family. You know,
And let me ask you this before you delve real further. In those belief systems, it can even possibly pinpoint a region also, correct?
yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely, yeah, absolutely. Because when I got a DNA test, well, I didn't get a DNA test, but my grandpa Earl, he was one of 14 children, and his oldest brother, who was about 88 or 89 at the time, was so kind. He lent us his DNA. And when the results came back, they said that, you know, it traced it to Cameroon or Nigeria.
Mm-hmm.
And I did some research once it brought up the countries through an ancestry DNA kit. Uh, Basically, when I looked at, the first thing that popped up was some things about witchcraft and about, you know, like root work and things like that. But what I learned in my family, and there are some stories that you know, along those lines about, you know, people going to you know, try to, you know, basically want to go visit the root doctor, basically. And,
Well,
you know, and that's what, you know, I was able to draw that connection. Like, maybe that's why some family members, you know, believed in that, because
and what
it's really an idea.
And one thing I would like to interject briefly is that, when somebody else tells your history, they sometimes demonize. We have depended
Mm-hmm.
on them
Mm-hmm.
and what is not demonization to that person, to that region. If someone else tells it and they're trying to deceive you, you understand? Then
Yeah, absolutely.
they're going to make certain things be evil to you. I'm not saying that, I'm not talking about
Yeah.
witchcraft being good. Don't
Yeah.
misinterpret.
I got
But there are
you. Yeah.
certain things that we were taught that was,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, evil is evil. It point blank is. But there were certain things that we were taught, even to our culture, the culture of mass, the statues, that was not worship. Different things we were taught was evil when it's not. That is who we are. That's our culture. And that's like you in Cameroon, being traced back to Cameroon. There are certain things in
Mm-hmm.
Cameroon that might have been taught that was evil, that is not evil. But go ahead.
Right. Right. And that's absolutely right. How the Western world can, just reshape or rewrite, other cultural histories. But there's another story. My Lyft driver told me this as well, and it reminded me of my grandmother. My grandmother died, my dad's mom. She really didn't like to take pictures, and I was told that her mom hated pictures. So, in trying to find pictures from our side, it's like, where are the photos? It was really a challenge. But when I got to, like, her other relatives, extended relatives, I was able to find so many pictures. But my Lyft driver told me this, that African proverbs and things of that sort, maybe, but um, basically photographs were kind of frowned upon in Africa, due to things of that nature, some of the belief systems. And he told me that basically over there, this is me talking through someone else, that you could point at someone in the picture and put something on them or something, and point at someone in the picture. And so that's why a lot of people, maybe all those older people born like in 1904, 1902, really didn't like to
Right.
take pictures,
I know a lot of
maybe.
older people. They don't like those pictures. My mother never liked pictures, but go ahead.
Hmm. Yeah, but another point you were saying about the elders, the Bible says, ask those former generations in Job 8:8 through 10. Ask the former generations and find out what their fathers learned, because they will really put you on the path you need to be, because you will learn from them what you cannot find in a book, number one, or it at least leads you to other avenues. There's a cousin. His dad is my grandma Dot's. Okay, Grandma Dot, her grandmother was Mama Ann. There's a cousin named Mr. Eddie Lee. He will be 106 years old on Wednesday. He lives here in Silver Spring,
Wow.
Maryland. Yeah, and he told me so much about, like, he knew every single person in that family. He knew Mama Ann. His dad was born 1875, and he was Mama Ann's first cousin. So he told me all about Mama Ann's first cousins, all about her children, all about her brothers and sisters, and he was just going down the line, like kind of like the griot. And I was just trying to write as much as I could. But most people alive today knew someone that knew those people back then, but he actually laid eyes on them. Like, he saw Mama Ann's mother, the lady that was Grandma Julia, the mixed lady, and she was a very cruel lady, from the stories I learned. But he told me how she looked, and that adds some complexities, because he said she looked like an Indian, but on paper and the records it says she was the daughter of a slave master. And but the stories I heard about her and been told about her, it really, confirms that, the evils that have turned our race against one another. Because how I understand it, she was like an overseer or some sort, and she really hated our people, and she hated my side particularly, because my side was merely, a little bit darker than the rest of the sides, and there were stories, they said she would just take her cane and just hit you for no reason at all as an old lady. My grandmother's Uncle Paul, I believe, he was a triplet. He said that the best day of his life was the day that his grandma died. Grandma
Mm.
Julia, she was just that bad. Yeah,
You
she
was
died
just
in
that mean. Oh,
1930.
okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they said she was a terrible. Yeah, she was really terrible. And yeah, but there's a cousin alive today, my grandmother's first cousin, cousin William. His mom went into labor with him at Grandma Julia's funeral in 1931, September 1931. So they had to end the funeral early so that, they go take care of her and so she could give birth. So he's like a testament, like in the flesh, that this lady existed, because as they were burying her, he was about to arrive. And that's an African proverb as well. When a baby is born, one of the elders return. I do know that that's another African proverb, but family history is healing, as I mentioned, in terms of breaking generational curses. It's assuring, for sure. It'll give you the strengths through the stories, give you your identity, having a dream, as we already said through Martin Luther King. But there are a lot of sources you can leverage. Like we said, the family reunion. Mainly, the most important thing is to make yourself available. Time is an asset, and it's just an asset, and you really have to use it while you have it, because it won't always be this way. So things always change. Change is the only thing that does not change. And whenever I've gotten a lot of confirmations throughout this genealogy journey to let me know I was on the right path. And I'm always glad that when I did, every time I did not listen, but majority of the time I did. There was one particular time during the COVID, when it first got started. I was collecting information on my mother's father's family. His dad came from about 10 siblings, so I was working my way around the branches that multiplied to get information on each one. And it was a grandson of one of the 10 still alive. And when I interviewed him maybe like on July 11th. And I kid you not, maybe by like the 20th of July, they were saying he was dead. And I kept putting off talking to him. And it's like, wow, if I didn't talk with him, I wouldn't have gotten that information, if I didn't move just in time, which is a process improvement strategy in the business world. Just really taking advantage of time, in terms of production. Think of it as killing many birds with one stone, kind of, sort of. So yeah, and what I'm saying is, versus using Ancestry.com is great. I've learned so much through Ancestry.com, but the wisdom and the jewels come through human beings, being elders, and making yourself available to talk with relatives, whether it's at a birthday party, baby shower, a funeral, really taking advantage of those key events to do what you have to do to get your family history done. You have to realize your role in it if you do begin to do it, because it will be sometimes where you want to turn back and wonder if I'm making progress. But you have to realize when you're doing it, you are the project manager. So if it happens, if it happens, it's really all at your control. So, you are control coordinating all the moving parts, of it. So that's just the part of being a project manager, being able to negotiate with this person to get this information. And
so, to assist the audience because we know that the school systems are, they're trying to shut it down. So what are some, you mentioned family reunions, you mentioned talking to, your elders and everything. What are some of the steps for people to get their genealogy and begin to teach it to their own children and family?
Mm-hmm. And that's a great point, because Generation Z, that's anybody born I think between 1997 and 2012. They are between 14 and 27 years old, I believe, this year. They are the future. They are why, the history is being banned, mostly. And I'm saying it to say, because they are writing our future, however they perceive it, and going forth. So there has to be a transition, there has to be a hand-in-hand transition. And what I mean by that is, the older generation has to get with the newer generation and begin to sit down and talk with them about these stories. I think about just what, even the Bible story, just an example, Paul and Timothy. Paul was much older than Timothy, but he recognized Timothy's potential in rewriting some of the stories, and that was an older and younger generation coming together. So that's what we have to begin to do. We have to take the story into our hands. One of the things I did was my one of my grandmother's first cousins, one of her granddaughters came down from Philadelphia to Goldsboro, and I gave her a tour of all the places that I learned, that was of significance to the family. Her side was from Philadelphia, and my side grew up in North Carolina. But that's one thing, family tours. Obviously, make a family legacy booklet, and I can help you, with that more if you're interested in doing that, collecting and documenting your family history. But you can host a family reunion. You can have a Zoom call, and it doesn't typically have to be a family reunion. It can be a gathering. It could be a get together. Back to getting Generation Z more involved. Once you got your legacy booklet, maybe you'll let somebody of that generation narrate it. Ask them for help to put it into a video, but you have to involve them, is what I'm saying, to carry it on and pass the torch, like Paul did with Timothy. Timothy was writing those books, and then he became the first bishop of the Church of Ephesus. So he went even greater than Paul. But you can subscribe to genealogy magazines. C is for communities. How to position yourself and leverage those informal and formal networks to get a better understanding of what you're doing, learning and growing at the same time. Such as, my grandpa's best friend, I visited with him one day randomly, and I never imagined the things he was going to share. All good things. He shared newspaper clippings. I was able to see a photo of my granddad's granddad, who was born like 1870 something, and I never imagined it would be in his house. Like, my grandpa didn't even have that picture, so how did he have it? So you really got to think outside the box, because it's like putting a big puzzle together and doing your family history. But it's so rewarding. It's highly rewarding. It's so rewarding. And
now,
you can do something else.
Let me ask you this real quick. Don't forget to tell your own story and write your own story for future generations. Is that,
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where I get into knowledge capture, if you will. K is for knowledge capture, doing a character analysis of some of the characters, like what to capture on to certain characters, like how they survived. There was an aunt, my grandpa's aunt, Maddie Mae. She gardened. Everything she ate came from her garden, but yeah, definitely. And let's see. You can do something simple like restore or colorize a family portrait that's maybe been kind of damaged or outdated, or you can recreate one. There was a family portrait of my mom's family, all her aunts and uncles, and of her when she was maybe like 2 years old, and it's about 30 people in the picture. When a cousin got married, I got everybody together to take a picture like that again, and that was in the 60s, and this was 2015. So you can recreate family photographs, just really break down the walls and barriers. Like I said, I had always knew Grandma Dot's 10 siblings and their children and families. But when I branched out to her first cousins that I found out that were still alive in other places in Philadelphia, and began to visit and talk with them, and get their photographs and see the things that they knew, I turned out with a much bigger investment than I ever imagined. So definitely going beyond your personal self, because you got to really get beyond yourself if you wanted to get it done. And it goes back to you're establishing your role as a project manager, but also you can obviously leverage places like libraries and libraries and memory institutions and archives. I visited the state archives, and I found a book about Grandma Dot's family history, and I never knew it was done. But in researching her family, there was the Library of Congress in 1936 did a federal writers project where they went out and interviewed all the former ex-slaves. And one of her great aunts retold the family story how two of some of the other great aunts were sold off to from a plantation in Duplin County to Richmond, Virginia. And after the war, one of them made it back miraculously. But she said, about how the mom cried her eyes out day and night and she never saw him again, and how the dad was a runaway slave and he was born 1803 and they would beat him all the time. They would beat him at prayer meetings and everything. So those details are priceless, so I would definitely say try archives, surname searches, databases online as well. Memory institutions. There are family history centers around. There's one in Duplin County. It's called the Carolina Heritage Center in the backwoods in Kenansville. They have a little house in the back of the county library, and it's designated just for family history. And in that place, in the backwoods of North Carolina, I found something I never imagined. So Grandma Dot maiden name was McIntyre. What I came to learn was that the people that owned the McIntyre family, they were descendants of there was one, I believe his name was Peter McIntyre. It said that his mom was Catherine Stewart, and McIntyre is Irish, or Scottish, and basically the family that owned my family, the McIntyres, were descendants of Mary, Queen of Scotland, she existed in like the 1500s. And she had her head chopped off. But I thought that was extraordinary to find your connections to history. And I only found that out because I was in the backwoods of North Carolina at the archives, a memory institution. So you really have to exhaust every avenue. That's what I'm saying, as, being a project and really be able to document so you don't, you can keep track and progress and don't have to repeat certain things in retelling your story.
Yeah. Now, you have a forthcoming book coming out, and so let's tell everyone about that. Hope everybody grab a copy of that when it comes out.
Absolutely.
Tell us about that.
Absolutely, yes, ma'am. So the ABCs of Black Family Genealogy is a book that I started documenting maybe 2 years ago, and I'm just in the final editing period of it, and I hope for it to be published no later than by the end of Black History Month 2024. So that information will be available soon to share. But in the meantime, until the book is published, what I'm also beginning to do is start training workshops via Zoom to elaborate on each of the 26 steps, and they'll be able to share with people. And if anyone is interested in that, they can reach me through my email, which is tkrichandson90@gmail.com, or simply at my cell phone number, which is 919. Okay.
You want to give your hold, just give out your email. You don't want to give your
Oh yeah, gotcha. Okay. I got you. Okay. All right. But
okay, let's not give out the cell phone number to
Yeah.
I'm gonna this is the name of the book, and then I'll put your email address up there, and they can oops, wrong one, sorry.
And they can find me on social media too.
Right. Let me this is the name of his book that's coming out in February, and I will put your email address up. So
okay.
And they can email you. I wouldn't suggest giving out any phone numbers.
Right, absolutely. But if anyone was interested, they would be able to understand the confirmations, throughout the journey, because like I said, there were a lot of confirmations that let me know I was on the right path, because it took me 7 years to do it. And a lot of times you might be wondering, am I making progress? So they'll be able to understand the tools and resources, how to overcome roadblocks, how to leverage informal networks, how to grow and share your genealogy knowledge, and how to take advantage of key moments, places, and sources through 26 steps.
Hmm. So this is Timothy's email address, tkrichandson90@gmail.com. For you to be able to reach out to him if you need some assistance with your journey, as far as starting your journey, even if it's just, writing your own story, like, because
Mhm.
somebody in the future generation is going to be looking at you as an elder one day,
Absolutely.
and you want to make sure that you're documented, and you don't want to, you want to be in sound mind, and the history that you want to remember, it's better to be written by you than someone trying
Mhm.
to piece it together. So
Absolutely.
begin to write your journey and search for others also. Again, his new book will be out in February. Will it be available on Amazon and all of the?
And Barnes and Noble and Books a Million. Yes, ma'am.
Right. It'll be
Yes.
by Timothy Richardson. So look forward for
Hmm.
that to come out. We want to make sure that we support him. Okay. And buy his book. Um, because he's given some jewels and some tidbits on how to research genealogy, how to begin to teach your family, your children, because you cannot depend on them to tell the truth. And also importantly, when it comes to history and these things, your local, who you vote for locally, on the state level and nationally, is important. You need to know where these politicians stand. Do not give away your vote.
Hmm.
Ask them, what is your position on reparations? Just don't, oh yeah, da 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 da, and then they go on about their way till they get elected. Do not give
Hmm.
your vote away for free. Ask them how, where do they stand on um erasing Black history in the school systems. If you see that the persons, look at your state, um and see, like I said, there was 23 states that has legislation. Look at, see what your legislation is. If these are and look and see who voted how. Vote against them, or vote for, either way. But you
Hmm.
need to make sure that the powers that be, that you're not electing them into office that is operating contrary to your best interests. And I'm gonna leave the floor for
Absolutely.
you now, Timothy, to before we end. I enjoyed that conversation. I could just continue to talk because it's so informative, but I want to respect your time, and I'm gonna leave the floor open for you to share with the viewers anything you would like to, that I might have neglected to ask you.
No, I just a public thanks to you. Thank you, because this is the first time I've gained public with sharing this project I've been working on for some time. So God bless you and thank you, and just thank you. I've enjoyed the
Thank you.
conversation.
I enjoyed the conversation, and what's important is that we support each other. We can buy everybody. Oh yes, okay, good. You got a congratulations.
Thanks, Betty.
Yes, and so make sure that we support each other. Purchase the book, pick up the book, and reach out to Timothy, and I'm sure he'll be more than happy to assist you to get along the way. Now, is there anything that I neglected to ask you that you wanted to share?
No, just in closing, just one final thing, and I hope I get it right. The purpose of all this is First Peter 2:19. Ye are a chosen generation, a special possession, a holy nation, that ye should show forth the praises of him who have called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. When you do your family history, you are showing forth his praises, okay? When you begin to put it together, you're stepping into his miraculous light. And why? Because he chose a generation. If you don't remember anything else, just remember 1 Peter 2:19 if you decide to do your family history. God bless you, and thank you.
All right. All right, Timothy, stay backstage with me. Everybody, we thank you. I'm going to drop you down. Everybody, we thank you for joining Save News, and we will have Timothy back when, especially after he publishes his book. All right, then we'll see you all.